Hello there guys, how are you all doing? Welcome back to Rule of Two Review, and let's just jump into it. So, E3 is officially underway, and there has been a lot happening, obviously. EA has already had their press conference, Microsoft wrapped up their press conference earlier today, and in just a little bit from the recording of this video, Bethesda will also be taking the stage. In fact, I actually have to kind of even try to do this fairly quickly, which we know is hard for me to do usually, so I can actually catch the beginning of their conference, because I am very excited to see what Bethesda is going to do. I really do want to make a video discussing EA and what happened with them. I'm going to just kind of do the quick version now, and I'll tell you that I thought overall their conference was kind of whatever, really wasn't all that interesting or exciting. I mean, it was fine, I guess. For me, obviously, the big thing was Battlefront 2, and let me tell you, Battlefront 2 has blown my expectations away, absolutely surpassed the best things I could have possibly hoped for to see from that game. I'll probably make my own video about that at some point, but we're going to bypass EA for now, and we're going to go right to Microsoft. So, Microsoft had their conference for 2017 E3 today, and it was a doozy. Man, it was really, really a doozy. Real quick, let's just get right into it. My instant gut reaction is I thought it was pretty great, you guys. I know that that's sometimes a controversial thing. Whenever a conference finishes, everyone's all over the place with these things, and people are adamantly this way or that way, and sometimes it gets combative, too. You see a lot on the internet, which really sucks to see. And for me, I walked away being more than impressed and really satisfied. So we'll start off with the big and obvious thing. They opened the show with the Xbox Scorpio, which we now know is the Xbox One X. Pretty interesting because I was starting to believe more and more going into the show that maybe the name Scorpio was going to become the final name. I actually liked the Scorpio as a name. I got so used to Xbox Scorpio, even more than like when the Switch was still called the NX. Some people really liked NX. I never cared as much for that, so I was glad when that name changed. But with the Scorpio, I kind of liked that. So I was really hoping that that rumor was going to be true, but it's not. It became the One X, and I guess we'll talk about that real quick. I think that overall, we'll talk about the name. The name is fine. I don't really think it's great. I don't really think it's terrible. It feels very 2017 Microsoft. It feels just like something that they would do today with what this console is supposed to be, and how it's more an iteration on the current Xbox One family than it is a new generation console. And that probably, you know, further aids in it no longer being called Scorpio. It's an Xbox One something. It's a One family console. So instead of the S, you get the X. And it's like, that totally works, I guess. In terms of if it's a quality name overall, I think that there's a couple of ways you can go about it. Some people certainly have had taken some issues, I should say, with the name. And some people think it's going to be really confusing and you know, a lot of the everyday average consumer might not quite know what's going on. And I do think that there's some truth to that. I mean, at the end of the day, there are some elements of naming that I think maybe isn't the best, but I think overall it's going to do fine. And I'm someone who thought that the overall messaging and translation of what the Scorpio turning into the X was actually pretty solid and pretty good. Like, it actually really impressed me and surprised me. Going into the conference, one of the things I was talking about, and here's as many other people talking about this, but for myself, it was like, okay, well, what's the messaging of Scorpio going to be? What's it going to look like? What's it going to feel like when they actually show us this console and try to translate to us what this thing is supposed to be and represent for Microsoft and for the current generation of gaming as a whole? That was the thing I was going into this waiting to see. Not necessarily, are you going to make it look amazing for me to go and run out and buy? What's it going to feel like to have the message of the Scorpio given to us? And that is what I think that they nailed. To me, it was very clear and obvious what they were doing when they showed the name, when they showed the console. They even did the specs thing at the beginning, which I didn't really care for, but I thought, considering what it was and what they were doing, it was still well handled. And to me, that's where I think that the messaging of the console totally came across. And then throughout the conference, as they talked about what it did for 4K, this and that stuff, again, I don't really care about, but as they translated that when they showed off new games and talked about the X compared to this or that, I thought they handled that incredibly well, you guys. I thought it came off exactly how they meant to. It didn't leave me with many questions. Yes, there were questionable and confusing things in their conference, sure. But the overall message, not every little minor detail, but if you take the lump sum of the good and the bad, I think the good outweighed the bad there. So I really have to applaud Microsoft on what they did. I think the console looks pretty cool. Now, I'm not going to buy one. It has not, like, convinced me to be this One X fan, so I'm not personally going to run out and get one. It doesn't really seem that interesting to me, but I do think they've done a good job with it. I like what it looks like. I like the fact that it looks just like another Xbox console. It's the smallest one they've made. It's got this liquid cooling. It's got all this crazy power. And it's honestly, I just think that they really did some good stuff there. Obviously, there are those confusing things about it, though, still, of course. And going back to the name thing, that is one of them. And I do think that there's some things about the name. If you want to talk about it confusing people, I think that yes, there is the possibility for the name 1X to confuse people. But I also think, you guys, that when it comes to the average consumer, like, because that's the whole thing, is people talk about the average consumer, not the gamers that pay attention like me and probably yourself and a lot of that stuff, because like we totally get it. But for the average consumer, is it going to be confusing? And I do think that there's a possibility that, yes, that might be a mistake with the name, as it confuses people. Okay, people will eventually get over that no matter what. And I think that there's also a case to be made that in today's society, where we have Galaxy S this, and iPhone 7S this, and 7C this, and upgrade this or that, and all these little letters attached to names of devices, even the everyday average consumer is pretty used to that, and that's a culture that we kind of live in with our devices, and I feel like Microsoft has kind of been building on that when they first went from the 1 to the 1S, and now the 1X. People are starting to pay attention to these things, and I feel like Microsoft is a powerful, rich, smart company when it comes to marketing, and if they put their all behind the messaging of the 1X, they'll translate to the consumer exactly what this thing is. And if they don't, then that will just be their mistake, but I think that the possibility exists for this to go over just well. And the other side of that is, you know, when I think about my personal opinion about not really caring about the name, yes, we understand it as regular gamers, and if the everyday average consumer really doesn't, I kind of don't care. I still think what they did with the Xbox One X was overall fine. I understand it. I'm a gamer who pays attention. If the everyday person doesn't, that's up to them to figure life out. I don't really care. But I get it, and I think a lot of you get it. So I'll wrap up the 1X thing here saying I think that they overall just did a really fine job with it. I will say throughout the period where they were discussing the 1X, even though they didn't sell me on it, but yet I was still impressed with how they kind of revealed the thing, I guess. They did spend some time doing some stuff I really didn't care about. The first half hour of the show, after they officially, you know, Phil Spencer came out and said it's called the 1X, and I was like, okay, well, let's see where this 1X thing goes. And then they had Homeboy come out and talk about the specs, and I was like, okay, I know people care about this, but I don't. This is boring. And then the 4K talk started to come in, and I was like, I don't care. I don't think this is important for gaming, at least not to the levels Microsoft and Sony are trying to make it, maybe in 6 or 7 years, but right now, I don't care. Most people don't care. I don't care. So just stop talking about 4K and specs. And I really wasn't enjoying that first bit. And they had the Forza guy come on and talk about Forza and show off the Porsche 911, whatever. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's a really nice looking car. I don't care about any of this. There is a market for that, so I appreciate it. But it started to make me realize in the first 20 minutes, I was like, gosh, this is that messaging from Microsoft where sometimes it's like they just don't speak to me when they do this stuff. This is the kind of narrative and vernacular that they use. And I realized that they're not talking to me. I'm not the kind of person they gear these messages towards, and they spent that whole first 20 or 30 minutes doing it. And it was a bummer, because it's like, you started with the 1X, well, show me why the 1X matters. Don't talk about the specs. If people think just the specs matter, I don't care. And it's tough because, well, with the 1X, the specs is really what's supposed to matter. And hence why, like I said, you guys, I'm not interested in it. Even though I get that I like the messaging overall by the time the show is over, it's not like it sold me on the 1X. I can just acknowledge they made a quality product and they translated well. That's what that comes down to. Anyway, the first half hour, I was like, man, I'm really worried about this conference, Microsoft. You had to do better things than this. This isn't solid. And then they turned it all around, because all of a sudden, they just went into the games, man. And you guys, that's why I loved this conference. Not because of the politics of this and that, not because of the opinions about 1X this or specs that or liquid cooling or Forza car, whatever. I didn't care about any of that stuff. How does this compare to this E3 compared to 5 years ago, prior E3 of the Sony conference, vertical of the Nintendo Wii U? I didn't care about any of that stuff. All of a sudden, I saw one of the 3 main console manufacturers on stage just giving me a trailer for a great-looking game, followed by another trailer for a great-looking game, followed by a trailer for a great-looking game, and then there was another couple of trailers for a couple great-looking games. And once that happened, I don't care what console they were on, I didn't care if it's exclusive to this, if it's Windows, Xbox that, if it's console launch exclusive dumb messaging, whatever that stuff was that was dumb, I just didn't care. I like video games, man. I said this on Twitter. I like video games. Just give them to me. Just give me games. That's all I'm looking for. And I will say, when it comes to Microsoft specifically, a lot of the naysayers against Microsoft for years, and I've been one of these people saying this too, have been saying, just give us the games. Like, don't give us any of this other crap, Microsoft. And you know what? After that first 20 minutes, That's all they did, you guys. They gave us games. And a lot of them were exclusive. Some of them were who even knows what the hell. They gave us so many games. What are we complaining about anymore at this point? Like, let's stop worrying about the... Again, I keep using the word politics. Let's stop worrying about the politics of, oh, it's Windows and Xbox, and I don't know how this fits into the X thing and this and that and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that stuff, like, it matters. It does, like, have some weight. But if we just step away from that for the sake of just E3, the week of new video games... Look at how great so many of those video games were. And I'll even further tell you guys, it's not like I want to play every single game I saw, but I can still recognize a great looking game, regardless of if it's a game for Rob or not. And I can recognize smart marketing, a good trailer, and something that's probably going to appeal to a wide variety of people, just like Forza. Like I said, I didn't care about it, but I know there's a market. That stuff matters. And so I just thought Microsoft... It really might be. I'm going to say this right here and now, you guys. I think it might be Microsoft's best press conference. And when you consider the fact that I hated the first 20 minutes, that really says something. So, major kudos and props to Microsoft, man. They showed off some amazing stuff. My highlights, there are some obvious ones. That Metro game running on the One X was amazing. That's my kind of game, you guys. Even though I'm a Nintendo gamer and Nintendo channel first and foremost, I still love very non-Nintendo types of gaming experiences. A lot of you guys know that. What Metro is the kind of typical non-Nintendo game that just speaks to Rob. I love that stuff. Give me a simple, atmospheric, huge, beautiful shooter, first person, third person, whatever. I just am a sucker for those, man. Like everyone, we all like different kinds of games and genres. That's one that happens to work for me. And there was a pretty good amount of that stuff today, and I thought Metro looked gorgeous, and it looked really fun, and I loved the environment and atmosphere. Metro was called Metro Exodus, what I'm dubbing Metrodus, hashtag Metrodus. You can start that as a thing if you want. And I thought that it looked really great, super, super impressive. They closed with the game Anthem, which was EA's big kind of reveal from their thing yesterday. That looked incredible, you guys. I thought it looked great. It's really, you know, one of a few games that seems to be building on what Destiny 2 first put out. I would be willing to say that Anthem has been being made for far longer than before Destiny 1 even came out. But Destiny was the first one out, so it feels like the first game to try to do something like that. And Anthem is like a next step. It was gorgeous. It's got flying jetpacks. I didn't really love how they tried to get that, like, gamer banter in there. Some trailers are starting to do that nowadays, and, like, it just doesn't work for me, man. It comes off as, like, cheesy and campy and just unbelievable. I just don't believe that that's what's happening, and I appreciate why they do it, but I just don't really need that stuff in my game demos anymore. Like, please, video game industry, stop putting fake gamers pretending to talk about, ooh, he needs to get more XP, sucker, who gets the loot? No one wants to. It's so dumb, but I don't care because the gameplay looked amazing and gorgeous, and I love big, open, atmospheric worlds like that, man. So Anthem, so excited. Good job, EA. Good job, Microsoft. Very excited for that. The other biggest surprise for me was the sequel to Ori. I was working today watching this, by the way, like, which I shouldn't have been. And I was almost like in tears. I was so happy. I was like, oh my God, a new Ori, and it looks so fantastic. Like, visually, what a great upgrade. And like that game, Ori's one of the best games I've ever played. Seriously, it's definitely like a top 20 probably, and one of my favorite platformers of all time. Really surprised me how good Ori was and how much I liked it. So to see a sequel, great news. If you haven't played the first one, stop being crazy. Go and play that game immediately. It actually just dropped in price today. Also, a couple other things that were really impressive to me. They showed off that amazing new Dragon Ball game. That is the best looking Dragon Ball game I've ever seen. And I never talk about this, but I am a Dragon Ball Z fan like nobody's business, you guys. It's right up there with some of my absolute favorite things in the world. Dragon Ball Z is perfect. It is the greatest show that is not lost. It's the greatest show ever made. I absolutely love Dragon Ball, and that game looked so freaking incredible. And I'm sure it's multi-platform. I don't think it's like an Xbox exclusive, but that was the first time I saw it. It looked like everything a Dragon Ball fighting game is supposed to be. Hand-drawn sprites. It was like Marvel vs. Capcom, only with Dragon Ball. Like, yes, give us more of that. So fantastic. They showed some other really cool looking indie games. That game Ashen, which apparently was first shown off a couple years ago. That looks really cool. It's kind of got like a Dark Souls vibe, I guess. I will say this, you guys. We need to give some credit and pay attention to the fact that there was a couple of trailers in a row of very Japanese developed games, which is exactly what I theorized, that they were going to have a strong Japanese presence, and that Microsoft has been working to do that. They've heard the cries, they've heard the calls, they understand that the power in the industry has gone back to the Japanese developer. They're making the best stuff, and Microsoft has always struggled there, and we saw them try with Scalebound, we saw them try with the Final Fantasy 15 demo last year. That stuff didn't work out, but this year, they showed Code Vein is coming to the Xbox One, and it looked fantastic running on the One X. Oh my freaking god, and that game looks great. They showed some amazing looking MMORPG that looked like a great game, and then I was depressed when I saw it was an MMO. That was kind of disappointing. And a couple of other things, like they have actually worked to get the Japanese developer on board with the Xbox brand. They really have. And yes, we lost Scalebound in this process, but that's okay. If we get these other amazing looking games, regardless of the platform, even if you don't play them on the Xbox, who cares? It's nice to see Microsoft getting that stuff on their console, which is now going to be the most powerful console available. And I think people will start to play their third-party games on that machine. So at this point, I'm just rambling, and I could keep going on about game after game after game. There was so much more stuff they showed that was really impressive to me, you guys. I don't even know what other beats I'd even want to hit, and I didn't want to put notes together and just read off a list of games. I've basically already done that anyway. There's a lot more. It looked really great. Very, very happy with what they did. I will say, quite a few of my big bets were correct, and I almost forgot. This is a game I need to talk about, and this was my biggest bet that I'm so proud that I got correct, and it was the Lucky's Tales. Super Lucky's Tales, I think it was called. Dude, I called that. I said that on my video, my last video about my final predictions. Microsoft was going to show some sort of exclusive game that feels more like a Nintendo or a Sony platformer. I literally brought up games like Yoshi's Woolly World and Donkey Kong Country and Ratchet and Clank. And I was like, I feel like Microsoft is going to have a game exclusive to the Xbox that's like one of those, that isn't a racer or a shooter, because that's what we normally see. And they freaking did it. That's what that game is. That is so, I'm so proud of myself for getting that one right, you guys, if you can't tell. And it also looked really good. Despite my prediction, the game looked really great. Also, a huge plus from the show is they finally sold me on Sea of Thieves. I did not really care for that game when I first saw it last year. Was it last year when they first showed it? The year before? I was like, whatever. I mean, I like Rare and I like Pirates, but it's online. It just looks like whatever. What they showed today, super impressed. 100% in. I'm ready to do it. That game looks great. So that's another huge win that they had. And then other bets I got correct, like I predicted $4.99, that was going to be the price. I predicted, what, Super Lucky's Tales. Assassin's Creed was demoed, it was featured on their show, and I did predict that Assassin's Creed was going to have some sort of big presence, and that was the first reveal of the new Assassin's Creed game, which also looked really good, by the way. There was a gameplay demo, so I got that one right. And there's 2 or 3 other ones I can't even remember at this point. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, you guys, so I can watch Bethesda's thing. I loved it. I absolutely loved it, guys. Even with the first 20 or 30 minutes where all the naysayers, I was with you guys in the beginning. I wasn't loving it. I was worried. I was not into it. I was like, Microsoft is messing this up. But they turned it around because they gave us games. Phil Spencer said at the end, they had 42 games at their show today. 22 of them are Xbox console exclusive. The other messaging, if you want to hear me rip apart the messaging, because I know people really love to get into the negative stuff. Yeah, the messaging of Xbox, what do they call it? Console launch exclusive or whatever. Yeah, it's a dumb phrase. I agree with you all there who are really down about that. It's a dumb phrase. It's confusing. I don't know what it means. They need to fix that messaging, absolutely. It's one of the things that they did wrong today for sure. But I don't care because of the games, man. 42 games, 22 of them exclusive to the Xbox console family, which also obviously also includes PC. That's great. That's great. Well done, Microsoft. Well done, Phil Spencer. Very, very proud of what you guys did today. And to me, it's a bigger deal. Final point. It's a bigger deal because going into this show, we all knew that Microsoft had to kill it. We all questioned if they had it in them. We all questioned if they wanted to even continue making video games anymore. We didn't know if they could ever make video games look interesting from an Xbox perspective ever again. And they totally did it. They absolutely did it. So if anything, they deserve a win just because they did what people thought they couldn't or weren't going to do. And that's huge. We can't not give credit where credit's due there. So I'm going to wrap this up. I give them an A-. I thought they had a great show. Best Xbox conference I've ever seen. One of my favorites in many, many years. Was it perfect? No. Is any conference ever perfect? No. So that's okay. They did a great job. The minus is for the confusion and the BS in the beginning. I didn't care about. That was really dumb. But they showed so many other games that all looked good. You get an A for that. Great job, Microsoft. I'm going to wrap this up. Tell me what you guys thought. Yell at me for liking Microsoft if you need to, because people love to do that. Thumbs down the video if you didn't like their conference, because it's really important to thumbs down a video when you don't agree with someone's opinion. And yeah, keep enjoying E3, guys. This is the best week of the year. This is what we do this for. I'm going to check out Bethesda's conference. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks as always for tuning in. This is Rob of Rule of 2 Review, and I will catch you next time on another E3 video.